Namaskar, dear students. Let us start the day with a prayer. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This is whole and that is also whole. From the whole emerges, and even if the whole is taken away from the whole still remains. In sum, this mantra embodies the spirit of Bharatiya Jnana Parampara or Indian knowledge system. In continuation of yesterday's discourse, which was on the rationale of the Oriental or Indic research methodology, we now focus on Indian discourse of Nyāya, its categories, scope and significance as a method of critical examination. In other words, you can say today's discourse or Vyakhyana is focused on how to use Nyāya or critical thinking as a tool of research methodology. So, that is first part would be the categories of Nyāya and their scope, and the second part, because this lecture has been divided into two parts, keeping in view the vastness and the scope of the categories of Nyāya, that is the topics of Nyāya, 16 categories of Nyāya. So, we shall be having 2 sessions on the scope and significance of Nyāya or Indian theory of logical and critical reasoning, which may profitably be used as a tool of research methodology, and that becomes a kind of Indic research methodology. How it becomes Indic research methodology? Because the theory of Nyāya, the system on the discourse of Nyāya, logic, critical examination, critical reasoning, has been designed in India, and it has subsequently been elaborated, discussed in such a manner that it has evolved into a school, one of the most important schools of logical critical thinking in India. A few things about the etymology of a Nyāya. Nyāya has many, you can say, interchangeable concepts. Nyāya is known as Vāda. Nyāya is also known as pramāṇa shastra. It is Vāda Vijnana, and Nyāya is also Anumana shastra. Nyāya is loaded with other significations also. Nyāya means justice. Nyāya means suitable or apt. Nyāya also means dharma. So, Nyāya is that path of thinking, that path of critical reasoning, which leads one or leads a seeker to the right knowledge. So, Nyāya is a means which is based on rigorous logical analysis of the subject matter, ultimately leading to the path of right knowledge, samyak jnana, and etymologically it denotes niyate anenete, niyate anen iti, iti nyāya, that is, that by which one is guided towards the path of right knowledge is Nyāya, etymologically speaking. So, Nyāya becomes the science of logic or the science of critical reasoning. Needless to say, it has been highlighted, the agency of tarka or logic or critical reasoning has been highlighted in the Bhagavad Gita also, because Sri Krishna, while exhorting Arjuna on the significance of logic and the relentless spirit of questioning, says, Tad vidhi pranapatena pariprashnena sevaya. If you want to know reality, know that, then of course there is no other way except cultivating the spirit of questioning, spirit of rational inquiry, spirit of critical examination, and then you should have a cultivate also a spirit of service unto your teacher, unto society, unto the world. So, the spirit of service, coupled with the spirit of questioning, that is critical inquiry according to the Bhagavad Gita. And again the Gita re-emphasizes the significance of critical thinking, critical reasoning, critical questioning. When Sri Krishna asks Arjuna or informs Arjuna that in the sciences related to debates and discussions, that is vada, pravadatam aham, I am the logical conclusion. So, that is how, starting from the Vedic Vangmaya down to our own times in 17th, 18th century, that is from Nyāya to Navya Nyāya, you have an unbroken tradition of Nyāya as Shastra, discourse, and then you have so many commentaries and meta commentaries in the form of Bhashya, Vartik, Tika, that have added to the existing corpus of critical reasoning and its systematic thinking, systematic discursive trajectory, and as to how the theories of critical reasoning or theories of logical thinking, have been categorized and systematized in order to give rise to a school of thought. So, what is Nyāya? How is it related to research methodology? So, Nyāya, as we discussed earlier on also, is the science of conducting critical inquiry into the objects of human knowledge, and etymologically it means going into a subject, that is a critical examination of the objects of knowledge, that is prameya, by means of logical proof. The Nyāya is therefore considered as tarka vidya, science of reasoning, or vada vidya. The primary objective of Nyāya is to enable a student or a seeker of knowledge to eliminate the cause of pain oblique suffering. Again, it is very much this worldly, contrary to the notion that modes of critical thinking in India are suffused with some kind of metaphysics or transcendentalism or spirituality. You can come out with this primary understanding, very basic fundamental understanding of the purpose of Nyāya, where this kind of critical reasoning will help a seeker eventually to eliminate not only suffering but the cause of suffering and create a power of critical discrimination, viveka, a power of discrimination, a power of critical reasoning, whereby a seeker can differentiate the good from the evil, the true from the false, in order to arrive at the truth, that is the right knowledge. And this way, by eliminating ignorance or any kind of illusion, the seeker attains the state of supreme felicity or nishreyas. So, this is important. Again, the yaksha prashna or an overwhelming question is how and why the discourse of critical reasoning or Nyāya stands ignored in the prevailing coursework, syllabi of research methodology, in the field of sciences, social sciences and humanities, in the institutions of higher education, in post-independence era in India. Now, this discourse is not meant to take up to cover up all these issues related to the ignoring of such a supremely significant tool of critical understanding. We will discuss it later on, but you can say that the dominance and continuance of the colonial discourse in the field of education, even during the post-independence era, may be said to be largely responsible for the deliberate avoiding of the Indian school of critical reasoning or Nyāya. Now, those students who just want to know the two sources that they can use for their easy comprehension of this system of Nyāya or logic, they can use Nandalal Sinha and S.C. Vidyabhushana's Nyāya Sutra of Gautam, and of course, Theos Bernard's Hindu Philosophy, Mumbai. Now, remember, the book Hindu Philosophy should not create any misapprehension in your mind, because the same book was published as the foundations of Indian philosophy in 1930s. Mind you, when Theos Bernard revised that book, he changed the title to the Hindu philosophy. So, the Hindu philosophy should not be taken as an adjective signifying that the 6 systems that have been described therein are only the Hindu systems of critical thinking. Mind you, all the 6 systems of critical thinking in India, that is Sankhya, Nyāya, Mīmānsa, Vedanta, Yoga, Vaisheshika, they are the 6 different perspectives on critical examination or critical thinking. And you should include the Buddhist perspective, the Jaina perspective, or the Kashmir Shaivite perspective, or even you can include all those sects like Charvaka, Ajivikas, all those different methods of critical reasoning were fashioned out in India, starting from the Vedic era down to 17th and 18th century. So, the exponent of Nyāya was Akshapad Gautam or Gautam, 6th century BCE. Now, 6th century BCE is important because he is again and should be the contemporary of Gautam Buddha, the enlightened one, and that was the period when more than 40 schools of logic, of rigorous critical thinking were prevalent in and around Nalanda itself. Read Huansang or Itsing or A.S. Altaker's famous book on ancient Indian education. or education in ancient India. So that era is important, and in the same era you have the Tantra Yuktis, that is the strategies of critical thinking, critical analysis, Shushruta, Charaka, Ashtanga Hridaya, Kautilya, again the same era, and those strategies of critical reasoning were available not only in philosophy, but primarily and more importantly in the works on medical sciences. And why were they included? Those insights, those strategies of critical reading, critical analysis included in the texts on medical sciences, because if you do not know how to make right meaning of a right sentence, if you do not know the right meaning of a sentence, of a discourse, then how would you use that textualized knowledge, whether it is in the field of social sciences or medical sciences or philosophical sciences or literary sciences? So that is an important. So down south you have the tradition of Tolkappiyam, again 6th century BC to 2nd century AD. You have Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra, again from 6th century BC to 2nd century AD. You can assign any date to it. Then you have Bhartrahari, 6th century AD. Panini's Ashtadhyayi, 8th century BC to 2nd century AD. Look at Patanjali's Bhashya. So the tradition of grammar, tradition of philosophy, tradition of writing Dharma Shastras also, Kama Shastra also, Moksha Shastra also, they all presupposed a critical method of reading the text properly. That is why it is a pan-Indian phenomenon. Remind you, the rise of Kashmir Shaivism, Spanda, and that Kaula, you know, that Kashmir Shaivism was a kind of Shaivadvaita. Okay. Now, so from Kashmir to Kanyakumari to Madurai, and from our place, that is Nalanda or Mithila, Darbhanga, to Gujarat, mind you, Akshapad Gautam is said to have spent his time in Nalanda, and then he went to Gujarat. Look at this what you call this knowledge based topography of India. India is a geopolitical entity, but India is a knowledge entity also. This is the Jnana Kshetra. And since all human efforts, all human actions, all human endeavors or actions have to be grounded in the Purushartha, that is the goals of human life, that is Dharma, Artha, Kam and Moksha. Therefore, needless to say, the aim, primary aim of Nyāya or the pursuit of any branch of knowledge, any system of thinking in India is to attain the position of true freedom, bliss, ananda, by eliminating ignorance and thereby attaining the position of true liberation, you can say. So the salience of dharma as the guiding principle, that is righteousness, it is not to be equated with religion or mazhab or any cult or sect or ritualism. No, dharma, without dharma, this whole earth, this whole cosmos will collapse, because it is because of dharma that sustains an atom or even the atomic particles, you know. So from atomic particles to the vast and the infinitely vast structures like galaxies, you know, and multiple galaxies, no entity of the universe can be separated from its dharma, from its essence, from what makes that entity, that is the tattva of any tattva, that is the isness of is. So, dharma can't be separated, and secondly there are dharma is justice, dharma is duty, dharma is righteousness, dharma is character, dharma is goodness, as we discussed in our earlier lecture, that if you want to sum up the entire Indian knowledge system in just one phrase, you can say, sir, Indian knowledge systems, wherever they come from whatever part of India they come from, are all grounded in dharma and they are purushartha oriented. So, they are not either supernatural or exclusively spiritual at the cost of the secular, as you have again you understand the world using Western logic into two spheres, dividing the world in two spheres, the sacred and the secular. No such division obtains in the Indian knowledge system. So, Akshapada Gautam and how he wrote those 528 sutras, remember, and then those 528 sutras are aphoristic statements, condensed statements of that methodology, that systematic discourse that help a student or a seeker evolve a method, a strategy of arriving at truth through rigorous reasoning, through a kind of argumentative practice, which is based on critical inquiry and critical reasoning. So, there are 16 categories of Nyāya, 16 categories. Now, these 16 categories are, or maybe further for our convenience, divided into the positive or affirmative categories and also the negative categories. Now, this is purely for our convenience that we can say as to how those 16 categories can be divided, classified further into two broad categories depending upon their usage as to how you should use those categories. Those categories can also be called the 16 topics, because Nyāya is Nyāya, logic is logic. All these 16 points, you can say, there are 16 topics that you have to understand in order to understand Nyāya as a whole. Remember, all these 16 categories, or they are the different topics, in the overall discourse of a Nyāya, So, you have to see the interconnections, that link one category to another, because these categories, sometimes they overlap also, and they are largely speaking interconnected categories, interdependent categories. So, if you know one and do not know the other, then the logical reasoning will be affected. So, look at this, that these 16 topics or 16 categories are called padarthas, and the first is pramāṇa, second is prameya. Let me quickly, pramāṇa, prameya, saṃśaya, prayojana, drishtanta, siddhanta, avayava, tarka, nirlaya, vada, jalpa, vitanda, hitvabhasa, chala, jati, nigraha sthanam, tattva jnanat, nishreyasah, vigamaha. That is, by knowing these 16 categories and using these 16 categories, aforesaid categories, you may arrive at one, the truth, and once you arrive at the truth or right knowledge, you may also attain the state of supreme bliss or supreme felicity, because the cause, not only pain, but the cause of pain, that is ignorance, has been eliminated. Okay. So, now what are these categories or 16 topics? Pramāṇa means means of right knowledge. For any kind of human effort for the discovery of knowledge, for the proper understanding of truth or any aspect of truth, first thing that you should have is the means of right knowledge. What are the means that you are going to use in order to arrive at truth? So, now this pramāṇa, these means, these you can say logical proofs presuppose that there is pramāṇa, because there is a pramāta, because you are the knower, and therefore the effort of the knower is to arrive at right knowledge, and you by using right means, you know. So pramāta means the knower, and then pramāṇa is the means of right knowledge, and would discover the prameya. Prameya means the objects of right knowledge, that is the entire universe can be the object of your knowledge, from this desk, laptop and screen to the ultimate secrets of this universe can be subsumed in the objects to be known, that is prameya. And by taking this path of pramāta, pramāṇa, prameya, what you will create? You will create prama, that is knowledge, that is right knowledge. So, this is the kind of equation between pramāṇa, prameya, pramāta and prama. And then you have prameya, the objects of right knowledge. So, what are these objects? There are 12 objects. We will discuss them separately very soon. Then you have drishtanta. Drishtanta means illustrations, familiar examples. You have saṃśaya. Look, after pramāṇa and prameya, the third category is saṃśaya, that is doubt, confusion. If you are in a state of dilemma, there can be a dilemmatic perception also. You deem it to be the valid perception, but the perception is not valid because it is dilemmatic. It is embedded in a sort of saṃśaya, doubt, whether this is or this not to be or not to be. That is the question, saṃśaya. Okay. Then avayava, how you arrange your logical statements. Suppose you know that this is a cow, and the cow belongs to Shivadi or Narada. Now, you have to arrange this conclusion that this is a cow and this cow belongs to Shivadi, you know, in a syllogistic manner. That is the parts of argumentation. What is avayava? Avayava is the units of that argumentative analysis, you know, and that is very logical. You can't say this belongs to Shivadi, which is a cow. Can you say this? You have to arrange that. So, look at the emphasis on the connection between the logical parts into a logical whole. Look at this. And then you have a tarka, that is confutation. Even if you are engaged in a discussion with one person or more than one person's, you know, person, then you have to have that tarka paddhati. That is how you confute. Even if you differ from others, then there is a method of showing your difference, how you create pramāṇa, and then in pramāṇa whether you have the direct perception which is of different nature, or you have anumana, inference of a different nature. So, that is the process is called the process of confutation, that is tarka. Then nirnaya, how do you arrive at a conclusion? Like in most of the research projects, when you comment on a particular issue, you resolve the inner contradictions, by resolving those inner contradictions at a point which is called the conclusion or the resolution of those conflicting dilemmatic positions, contradictory positions sometimes even. Okay. And then vada, one of the most important aspects of logical thinking, critical reasoning is vada, discussion. We will take it up later on, because after vada, then we have jalpa, vitanda, hitvabhasa, chal, jati and nigrahasthan. They all concern the negative aspect. Negative aspect does not mean that this is undesirable aspect of tarka paddhati or logical reasoning. No, every student, every seeker of knowledge is required to understand the significance of controversy or wrangling, that is jalpa. Because you may be surrounded by people at times who will not use vada, that is proper discussion, rather they would use that kind of negative logic in the form of controversy or wrangling. Most of the political debates, all those debates in the field of ideological conflicts or ideological discussions, they use this kind of controversy or wrangling. And then the third one is that vitanda. Vitanda is cavil. That is non-critical, illogical condemnation or denial of the position of the other without knowing the position, without knowing the subject matter under consideration. Your only task is to deny the statements, logical statements made by the speaker, or the logical positions upheld by the other party, because by constantly denying, you are trying to destroy the position of the other. And then of course a very important category is hetvabhasa, that is false reasoning, pseudo reasoning, fallacies, defective reasoning, defective logic. So you should also be conscious that your opponent may be using not the right kind of reasoning, may be giving you not the right kinds of reasons, but the false reasons and the pseudo reasoning in order to defeat you or convert you to other positions upheld by the other party. So look at how pragmatic and how pragmatically this field of critical reasoning was designed, so that you should be conversant with not only the positive aspects of logic, but also be aware of the possible misuses, or in the worst case apad dharma shivadi, you may be prepared to use these categories also. Apad dharma, if there is an opponent, if there is a rival who uses all kinds of immoral, unethical means only to defeat you and establish dharma, establish adharma, So how would you fight against the forces of adharma that may be present in the form of academicians, scholars, different forms of ideologies, okay? And they appear to be very attractive because they are funded by the foreign or global powers. Are you getting me? So you have to be very cautious that in the garb of logic there may be pseudo logic, that in the garb of reasoning there may be pseudo reasoning, In the garb of reason, there may be pseudo reason hetva bhasa, because this is the chal. Chal means equivocation, constantly avoiding the truth through a kind of semantic sophistry. As I said, in the doxa of the interstitial spaces, of the traces of the bricolage. Now, I am using English only to confuse the minds of the dear students, because I do not want to mean anything. My only purpose is to confuse you, so that you may not arrive at the emptiness and the hollowness of the speaker that I am. So, this is in contemporary context, the negative uses of reasoning, should also be understood rigorously. And then nigrah jati. What is that jati? Now remember, jati is all in your courses on social sciences and your social theories of literature or sociological theories of literature. Caste is supposed to be the synonym to jati. Now jati is completely different from caste. So jati is that commonness or difference. So sometimes we create futile arguments because we tend to either overemphasize the likeness or similarity or the difference. Are you getting me? That becomes the futile, that becomes a kind of, you can say, counterproductive logic, because you are only seeing the likeness or the unlikeness, similarity or difference. To you, no reasoning is required, no pramāṇa is required, no prayojana is required. What is required is merely the similarity or the difference. So that is again an error. And then the 16th one is, there are positions when there is no debate possible. So they are the points of disagreement, remember. So when you have 24 such points, if you come across these points, don't argue, because then no debate is possible. No debate is possible, because that is the point of either the other party should accept defeat, and even if the other party does not accept defeat, because it shows those points of disagreement, but the debate is not possible, vada is not possible, discussion is not possible. Okay? So those 24 positions, and futility of argumentation, 22 points. So look at that kind of schema developed very carefully by our acharyas, Acharya Gautama, and who lived in the area around Darbhanga, only some 200 kilometers away from Nalanda, this whole area, And so now we again something that I think you should not lose sight of. Why is this all important to know? Why all these 16 categories important to be known and understood by a student? Because they systematically enable you to eliminate several levels of ignorance. How? Rishi Gautama says, Dukha Janma Pravritti Dosha Mithya Jnananam Uttarottar Apayat Tadanantar Apayat Apavargaha. That is, by attaining or arriving at right knowledge, your ignorance is destroyed. Are you getting me? Your ignorance is destroyed. And by eliminating your ignorance, your faults are decimated. Once you destroy your ignorance, your faults are decimated, and once your faults are eliminated, then it also stops or prevents your inauspicious activities, inauspicious tendencies, you can say, pravritti. Once your faults are decimated, then since there are no faults, then all your tendencies to act, pravritti, tendencies to act will become auspicious. They will not move towards unethical direction, illogical direction, and once these the inauspicious tendencies are checked or controlled, or you can say destroyed, then evil actions are impossible. You know, once your tendency to commit an evil action, you know, that is conquered, then the evil action will not generate. Look at the concomitance, you know, of the sequential, you know, elimination of errors, you know, and once your action becomes good, that is the right action, then your right action will culminate into the arriving at right knowledge. Are you getting me? And that is the position when you will become free from this cycle of dukkha, that is birth and death. That is the position of true freedom, true liberation. So, that is why I wanted to just elaborate in brief the cycle as to how by properly understanding the various stages, the categories, the topics of Nyāya, you may attain true freedom, which is the goal of knowledge in fact. So, what is pramāṇa? Pramāṇa is the means through which we arrive at right knowledge. Pramāṇa is the means, and the means are four. That is, what are the tools, what are the means that we adopt to arrive at right knowledge. So, pramāṇa is the means through which we arrive at the right knowledge. Now, there are four kinds of pramāṇa in the discourse of Nyāya or critical reasoning. They are perception, that is pratyaksha, inference, that is anumana, comparison, that is upamana, and verbal testimony, that is shabda pramāṇa. They are the four means of right knowledge. Now, again, the Charvakas admit, this is the area where the Charvakas were you know, disseminating, propagating their thoughts. Charvakas, you may not compare with them hedonists or Epicureans of the Greek tradition, but the Charvakas, the first place has been given to these materialists, you know, in the Sarvadarshan Sar Sangraha. You know, they have not been persecuted, executed, rather their positions have got to be understood properly, because sometimes you will find that this kind of evidence that the Charvakas, these materialists demand, resemble the evidence system that is present in the scientific logic, that is the logic used by the scientists. Because Charvakas admitted only one pramāṇa, that is the direct perception of reality. So, direct perception of reality, Now, this direct perception of reality, and we will get to know as to how the direct perception of reality shuts out all the other possibilities of perceiving the truth. So, that is another matter, but due credit should be given to those materialists named as Charvaka, that they said that whatever can be experienced through senses, is truth, because we do not know what anumana is and what saṃśaya is. You know, we do not know what comparison is. You know, we know it because we experience it through senses, and that is the truth. So, very valid position. but the cycle of logic is incomplete, because the position upheld by the Charvakas shuts out or makes us blind to other aspects of reality which cannot be perceived through the direct contact with senses. When your objects of perception are not in direct contact with your senses, then so there are things and things in this world which cannot be perceived through senses, cognized through senses, yet they are very valid. They are very valid. They are valid objects of knowledge. So Charvaka. Then the Vaisheshikas and Bodhas, they admit of two, that is perception, pratyaksha, and anumana. Nyāya admits of these four categories, but the Vaisheshikas and Bodhas admit of two, that is perception and inference, anumana, and pratyaksha. And the Saṅkhyas, those who use the Saṅkhya system of critical reasoning, they say that there is pratyaksha, that is perception, inference, that is anumana, and then verbal testimony or the shabda pramāṇa. Three kinds of evidence, three kinds of proof, three kinds of means of knowledge, and it is the Nyāya that admits the four. Now, these are the four means of the creation of right knowledge, but then there are four other means of right knowledge which were added later on, that is the Prabhakaras, that is the Mīmānsakas, they added the fifth one, which is called Arthapatti. Arthapatti means presumption, implication. So it is raining and therefore there must have been the clouds, or it has just rained, there must have been the clouds. You just imply, certain things imply the existence of other things. So, but the Nyāyikas said that this arthapatti or presumption is a kind of anumana, inference. So it cannot be a separate category. Secondly, the sixth one was added by Vedantins, that is anupalabdhi or non-existence or abhava. You know, Atman is abhava, anupalabdha. Atman is anupalabdha. But whatever is non-existence can be proven also, can be critically analyzed also. How would you analyze it? How would you analyze? Well, that again, that is through the Shabda Pramāṇa as well as Anumana, that is through verbal testimony as well as inference. And then Pauranikas, they understood, or they also added two categories, that is Sambhava or probability, and Aiteha, that is the sense of itihasa. Aite, not sense of history, sense of itihasa. So now the Nyāyikas said, those who were the scholars of Nyāya tradition, they upheld that the verbal testimony consists of the probability as well as the sense of itihasa or the sense of tradition. So you can further condense all these four categories added later on into the pre-existing four categories. Are you getting my point? So these eight kinds of pramāṇa or means of right knowledge are there, but these can again be, you can say, as you can say, dovetailed into the four pre-existing Nyāya categories. Now, pratyaksha, that is the direct perception, and pratyaksha is important for the perceptional knowledge. Pratyaksha is the direct perception through senses. So, a very important kind of perceptual knowledge is to be produced through that pratyaksha, direct perception, because this is real, this is actual, this is specific, and this is particular, this is not vague or ambiguous, and this is not hallucinatory or visionary. Are you getting me? So, a mic is a mic, and a laptop is a laptop, and a classroom is a classroom. Classroom is not a garden, because this is my direct perception. This is my pratyaksha through my eyes. And a rose will not smell like asafoetida, because asafoetida would have a different odor than the fragrance of a rose, because again my sense is active in perceiving, in cognizing that object. Okay. So, direct perception is there, and so therefore, since it is non-erratic, because it is non-erratic, there is no scope for any error in the direct perception. Okay. Then the second one is the pramāṇa, or the means of inference. Now, this is very important, because even when you perceive or cognize an object through direct perception, through pratyaksha, remember, but you cannot perceive the whole, because something is left out that is beyond the perception, beyond the direct perception. Then the process of inference starts. And, now, how it starts? Because you can make an inference from cause to effect, that is purvavat, cause. What was the purva position? Purva means what was the cause? So, your anuman takes care of cause and effect, that is that inferential knowledge, that emerges from the analysis of the cause of an issue or a subject matter, and then the effect of that cause. Second is the sheshavat inference. Sheshavas is a posteriori. First, from cause to effect is, that is a priori, and that is second one is from effect to cause. The ground is wet, and there are clouds. So, it must have rained, from effect to cause. So, that is sheshavat. And third one is samanyatao drishtaha, that is something which is commonly seen, commonly perceived, which implies the knowledge of one thing derived from the perception of another thing with which it is commonly seen. That is, on seeing rain, one infers that there are clouds. So, one thing that you see, and you, like if there is thunder and lightning, then you can easily say that rain is, either it is raining or it is about to rain. Okay? Then upamana, the third one is upamana. I am talking of the means of right knowledge. Can you write your research paper or dissertation without illustrations, without examples? So you have to demonstrate your knowledge of a thing through its similarity to another thing, or something which was previously well known to you. So, when there is something which was already known to you and you have perceived another thing, and if you find that these two things have some kind of similarity, then in the process of proper perception of reality, you use that previously earned knowledge, which is similar to the object of your perception right now. So, suppose you you are told that you would see a Nilgaya or a water buffalo or Gavaya, because that Gavaya, you have not seen Gavaya, but you have been given the features of a cow, that there is a similarity between a cow and a water buffalo. Once you enter that area and you find the cow-like animals having the features of, you through upamana, you conclude that these are not cows but cow-like creatures, animals, and hence there are water buffaloes. That is the name that has been given to those. Now, mind you, it's very important to understand that the names of the objects are not objects. This is a condition in pramāṇa, because you may say, sir, we call cow, the animal called go is called cow in English. The object is one, and if there are 6,000 languages in the world, then there may be 6,000 names of every object. So, sir, what kind of right knowledge, of that object may be produced when each object is different by virtue of name? So, therefore, the first condition of entering or using pramāṇa is that the linguistic referent, should not be equated with the logical proof of that object. The logical proof of that object, that is, whether you call it cow or go, that depends on your linguistic, cultural, social context. It has nothing to do with that logic of that reality. What is the logic of that reality? That this animal is an animal that you must understand. Whether you call it, give it the name, a saṃśaya of a cow, that helps you understand that object. By naming the object, you can make it different from other objects. So, naming and differentiation, they are the yuktis, they are the strategies, like the sun rises in the east and the sun sets in the west. This is your critical, this is a non-critical statement, illogical statement, because the sun never rises and the sun never sets, because that is the pramāṇa. But you have the pseudo inference and the pseudo logic that the sun appears to rise and the sun appears to set. So, that is the point. That then there is the shabda pramāṇa. Now, shabda pramāṇa. Now, remember, in our day-to-day life, when we do not exercise our direct perception, because we can't have the cognition of those objects through our senses, then we use inference, upamana, comparison, but more importantly, that verbal testimony, that is, we go to the testimony provided by a reliable person, an apta, a reliable person, who is possessed of true knowledge. Who is that reliable person? Who is possessed of true knowledge and is truthful in word and deed. So, we consider the verbal testimony of that person who is trustworthy, who is grounded in truth, and who has an exemplary, commitment to the exploration of truth, because he is possessed of true knowledge, jnani. And this verbal testimony can also be of two kinds: that which refers to things or matters which are seen, and that which is not seen, drashta and adrashta. Mind you, shabda pramāṇa is about, like if you have the Shabda Pramāṇa about the definition of a table, table is an object that you see, but you do not know how to define the tableness of a table. So, you say, sir, Sushant, let us go to Sushant ji, he is an expert on furniture and he has written a Shastra on the apprehension or comprehension, logical comprehension of certain articles which we consider as items of furniture. So, if you want to understand the use or misuse of certain chemicals in the form of fertilizer, in order to sensitize the farmers or peasants about the impact of that particular fertilizer or chemical fertilizer on the ecosystem, then you go to the agricultural scientists. They become the reliable persons, and those who have worked in that, in the field of agricultural sciences, you know, they become your apta. If you are analyzing a work of literature, then all your literary theorists who I am saying wrote compendiums, or you can say those rigorously argued, critically examined, you know, positions in terms of the analysis of a literary work, and now they become your apta. So, from Bharat to Acharya Jagannath, from 6th century BC to Pandit Rao Jagannath, the 17th century, and then subsequently you can't ignore the Sri Aurobindo, Ananda Kumara Swami, or even such impeccable you know, writers of poetics like Premchand, like Rabindranath Tagore, Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay, you know, Nirmal Verma, Aggeya, Mahadevi Verma, they were the great aesthetes, but they become our apta or sources of Shabda Pramāṇa. Suppose I am reading, I try to collect a particular evidence for a book of physics, for any incident or issue related to physics. Would you go to Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra as a Shabda Pramāṇa? You would then go to the discourse of mathematics and physics. You would either go to Kanad, that is the first physicist, the philosopher of science in Indic tradition. So, you may go to Kanad, or even in the Western discourse, you may go to the quantum physics, Einstein, you may go to Schrödinger, you know. So, they are your reliable sources of Shabda. And remember, this Shabda Pramāṇa is about something that is seen and something that is not seen, the tangible and the intangible. So, Shabda Pramāṇa is also very crucial. Then the objects to be known. This entire universe is prameya, entire universe. Even your feelings, emotions, Shivadi, as you said, sir, what is the perception of the emotions? The emotions are to be known properly. Otherwise, if you are guided by pseudo emotions, you know, or pseudo feelings, there will be chaos in society. So, look at these 12. These are the 12 broad categories. They are not normative or prescriptive, because Atman, soul, Atman cannot be translated as soul. Again, this is again the non-translatability of Sanskrit terms, Rajiv Malhotra and Baba Satyanarayan Das. Non-translatables are, but you have a kind of, for the sake of intelligibility or your critical convenience, you say, sir, Atman is soul or analogous to soul, and this Atman is the seat of critical thinking. This Atman is the seat of all human efforts. This Atman is the seat that makes your indriyas, your senses, you know, active. So, the source of energy, in whatever form it manifests itself, either psychologically or somatically or spiritually, you know, Atman. Therefore, know your Atman, Atmano are Atmano Shrotavyo, है ना? Atmanam eva Shrotavyo, Bodhavyo, Dhyatavyo. Look at this, the invocation to understand that Atman, because Atman is the primary locus, sthana. Then Sharira, even Sharira, Atman is Adhyatman, on body. That is, Adi means on. Adi means on. That is, your Atman, your Sharira is there. So, you can't discount body. Those who say that India stands for what? Austerities, tapasya, abnegation, abstemiousness, and the negation of body. No, they are wrong, because body is again an entity to be known properly. All your ailment, because body is the engine that drives. The energy that drives the engine is Atman, but the mechanicity of that Atman needs a kind of somatic dynamism, for which Indriyas are needed. Then again, if there is body, there will be Indriyas, your senses. Therefore, Atman is the first thing to be known, and then Sharira, all the problems, all the issues related to your body. So, look at how your psychological sciences, biological sciences, you know, can be arranged, all kinds of problems along this axis. Sharir and Indriya, you are having cardiac problems, so bodily problems. You are having some problems, whether they are orthopedic ones, then your organs are not, again, body related problems. And again, there is a disjunction between your Indriyas, and your Sharir, then psychosomatic dysfunctional disease, or all the arthas, because all our senses operate, mind you, the senses presuppose arthas. What are the objects of artha? I want to drink water, then I want to drink water, that is my Indriyas presuppose an object, that is water. So, my Indriya, that is taste, my Jivva, my taste. So, that is again the Pancha Mahabhuta, water. So, look at this interconnectivity between Sharira, Indriya, Artha, and then even if you have your body, your senses and the objects of sense, then the problem is solved through intellect and mind. If you do not have an operational and analytical intellect and a healthy mind, a healthy body should have a healthy mind. Even there is an English proverb. Look at that holism which is presupposed, which is a precondition in Indian systems of knowledge. Nyāya presupposes that you cannot leave out the interconnectivity between all these 12 objects of right knowledge. So intellect and mind, and remember, once you starting from Atman and that is soul, body, senses, objects of sense, intellect and mind, you understand the interconnectivity and interdependence of all these objects to be known properly, then you will also understand the activities, that is the pravritti, your cheshta, your efforts, your pravritti, because your pravritti presuppose this interconnected, concordance, this interconnected series of items. Then if you understand the activities, then in your activities there will be faults and there will not be faults, but we are not as much bothered about our sound actions, we should be bothered about our faults. Once you understand your faulty actions, you can avoid faulty actions and you will take the right action. You will take to the path of right action. What is the right action? In order to know the rightness of action, you should know what is the wrong action, what is the non-right action. Therefore, your faults, and remember, most of the things that we know through what they are not. Are you getting me? So, once you take that thing, like you cannot take the day for night and the night for day, because you have been told that night is the period of continued darkness for say 12 hours, and the day is the continuous period of 12 hours of bright sunshine. So my point is, so these doshas are also the objects of right knowledge. Look at, they did not say because once you know the dosha, then you will also know the virtues, which are to be cultivated. Then again the term that has been used is pratyabhava, that is rebirth. You can take this pratyabhava to be the idea of a punarjanma, that is reincarnation. Now, my dear friends, since we are in the field of critical logic, critical reasoning, now this rebirth or reappearance is the reappearance of a principal idea. Principal means important idea. The idea which was important at one time, and may that idea be again very important, even more important, in a different time period, even after a gap of 2000 years. Like we are going back to the earth as our mother, that is the concept of Prithvi Sukta in Atharva Veda. Now the time of the Atharva Veda was thousands of years before, right? We do not know how many years before the birth of Jesus Christ. But that knowledge that you are living in a universe where everything is interconnected through rhythm, through that cosmic rhythm and cosmic law. Remember, you have to live a kind of symbiotic existence with the cosmic creation. If you break or violate that cosmic rhythm and cosmic law, then entire earth planetary existence and the cosmic Srishti creation will be adversely impacted and affected. Now, this is the knowledge which was produced. Now, that knowledge which was produced long ago is taking the pratyabhava, that is, it is being reborn. It reappears, it is now being recontextualized in a differently constituted context. Do you get my point? Then there is pain. Look, they say that you should learn not about sukha, but pain has got to be looked into, the causes of pain and the methods of the elimination of pain. Therefore, the objects of right knowledge, contrariwise, should have been sukha, the attainment of sukha. Shivadi, it is not sukha. They say that learn about dukkha. Your all burden of social sciences, philosophies, even normative sciences, is the avoidance of dukkha. But how can you avoid dukkha in the world, suffering in the world, pain in the world? Remember, if you do not know what dukkha and what the cause of dukkha is, remember, the Rishi could have said, learn sukha. You would have been misled. So look at the causality, look at the structure of that logic. That structure itself is self-explanatory. And then the last position, which is to be known, in all kinds of human efforts and in all matters of human reflection, Indian knowledge system, Nyāya, or all the 6 systems of Indian knowledge system, they are highly reflective. They are self-reflective also, internally reflective also, mind you. Therefore, the position of liberation, apavarga. Now, this liberation is not the spiritual liberation, mind you. When the West, in its process of reasoning, it discounts the spiritual as non-experiential, irrational, mythical, Now, we say no, release is then object. How do we get the true freedom? Because it involves the systematic attainment and simultaneous attainment, of social freedom, individual freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, cultural freedom, and then the final one, that is the spiritual, that is the atmic, Atmabodha. What is freedom? Is Atmabodha. And Atmabodha is the Sarvabodha. Atmabodha is Atmabodha because of Atmavata Sarva Bhuteshu. Atmavata Sarva Bhut. Who are these Bhutas? All the Panch Mahabhutas, all this cosmic creation consists of those 5 basic fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, air, space. So, once you become one with those Panch Mahabhutas, that is, there is no difference, you become a kind of pure consciousness, but that is the highest level. Not everybody becomes an IAS officer in the process of attaining the position of an IAS officer or a district magistrate. Sometimes the students can qualify the subordinate service commission, so they end up being tehsildars, naib tehsildars, or patwaris, or police inspectors, or DCPs. Look at the kind of schema evolved, that this is the highest stage. If you are a sadhak who is able to understand all these 11 coordinates of human existence, remember, or the cosmic existence, then you can attain the highest level, and that has been attained by some. The Buddha is an example before you. So, this is prameya, and even in this prameya, I have tried to, give you some kind of explanation also. So, you can skip this explanation. You can, if you want to read it, you can read it quickly. I have already explained all these prameyas. I think I have discussed these, Shivadi, individually, separately. Now, the third one is doubt or saṃśaya. It is important to remember that contrary to the ideological burden of certain dominant ideologies, whether they are Marxist, capitalist, liberal, which are camouflaged in the global discourses or discourses of globalization, that preclude any possibility of creating a doubt. You can't doubt the validity of implicit in the Marxist ideologies. You can't doubt the validity of the feminist perspective on the condition of women. You can quit feminism or you become a post-feminist, but then again you have to be in consonance with, your argumentation should be in accordance with the theories of post-feminism. Are you getting? So, this is again a bondage to a structured thought system where there is no scope for any kind of doubt. Now, here you have the third, if you want to inculcate, if you want to have that critical analysis of any subject matter, then you should know how to solve the issues or the cognition which is riddled with doubts. You are trying to cognize a thing, perceive a thing, create some knowledge about, real knowledge about a real object. But the problem is that there are conflicting perceptions, conflicting judgments about a thing. So, the mirage, whether there is water or not water, the serpent or the rope, until or unless you resolve this conflict. So remember, there can be doubt because you recognize properties which are common to many objects at the same time. Like you see the shadow of a tall object and you see it from a distance, and this is twilight. So, when you see that tallness of that shadow, you are unable to discriminate whether this is the shadow of a human being or the shadow of a pole, a post, because that tallness is common to both. So, that is then aneka dharma, when you see the properties which are not common, but you still consider that these qualities, recognition of properties not common, because on hearing a sound one questions whether a sound is eternal or not. Sound is eternal, sound was always already there, or sound is not permanent. Now you are in a state of confusion, in a state of doubt. Then there is conflicting testimony, that is, even by your academic study, whether you use the Marxist lens on understanding India, then India is hell for you. India is Brahminical, India is a land of barbarians, India is, if you use the Marxist lens, and that Marxist lens follows the Marxist logic. So, remember the reasons given by the Marxists, they are hetvabhasa, fallacious, defective logic, but it will take an Indian to critically investigate all those points of reason, that is hetu, given by the Marxists, including Marx himself, to understand them as hetvabhasa, that this is not truth, this is not true of India. So, the kind of perception of India which is there in Marx's own discourse on India 1853 to 1858 is a classic example of creating doubts, because that is an example of pseudo reasoning. And then there can be the irregularity of perception also, irregularity, that is virodhapeksha, that when you see the mirage, then two contradictory positions, whether there is land or there is water. If there is water, there will be no land, and if there is land, there will be no water. And then there can be irregularity of non-perception. One is irregularity of perception, then irregularity of non-perception, like the presence of water in a pool. Then you see that presence of water in a pool goes without saying, but presence of water in radish or carrot or in tomato. Now, when you look at a radish or a carrot, there is no water. You cut a radish, you cut a carrot, and there is no water. But carrot will not be carrot without water, and a radish will not be radish. Like a sugar cane without water is impossible, but water is not visible in the form and shape of a sugar cane. So, if you go by the appearance, then you will be in a sort of doubt whether water exists there or does not exist there. Then the purpose. Yam artham adhikrityam pravartate tat prayojanam. Remember, all your efforts regarding the perception of knowledge or perception of the true nature of an object, should have a prayojana or presuppose a kind of purpose, because your entire effort will be directed towards that purpose. So, remember, if you are a physicist and there is the fall of the apple, then the fall of the apple will appear to be an instance of gravitational force to a physicist like Newton. Even the gravitational force was first referred to in the Vedic Vangmaya. Remember, again, it took how many thousands of years, but that is another story. But you have to have the perspective of a scientist. But the fall of the apple to an agriculturist would be either the gain or loss of a crop. If the apple is riddled with a disease, then the apple, a kind of immature apple, half ripe apple may fall, and this will result into the loss of crop. So, to a peasant, to a farmer, the fall of apple will be a different object of knowledge. The objects remains the same, but the prayojana is different. Prayojana is different because prayojana is not to prove or disprove the force of gravity. The prayojana is what will happen to my crop of apples. समझ में आया ना? That is a difference. So, if prayojana changes, so condition of women, all your feminist research projects in India, they focus on the woman's body and women's mind, women's actions and women's bodies, considering then that there is an essential difference, an eternal difference between women and men, and they are locked in some kind of hostile dualistic relationship. So, that is one prayojana. You conduct your research, you have that kind of argumentation, prayojana. But on the other hand, a researcher will take a position because there is neither feminism nor masculinism. This is the human condition where the body, mind, intellect and efforts of all these human beings are involved in doing and performing their actions in a particular manner. So, there should be something that impels, that drives a particular community of human beings or a particular individual even to behave in a particular manner towards or unto another human being who may be either a woman or a man. Are you getting me? So, the exploitation of one human by another human, whether that human is a man or a woman or a transgender, that is another prayojana. That look at the existential position, the astittik dasha, considering body, mind and soul as a whole, and how an individual, and his or herself is interrelated or is intersected with the actions of another human being in a specific context, that may be the purpose of another research project, and that will also create new knowledge about the condition of women and condition of men also, because so again you see that kind of. Then familiar examples so these familiar examples are needed. In logic you say, sir, thus it happened and it also happened there in that condition. Therefore, my perception of something, my cognition of something, can be compared with another example which also brought about the same kind of knowledge. So, drishtanta, and drishtanta is important because it creates a sadharanikarana, it creates a commonality between the expert scholar and an ordinary human. Drishtanta will not be a drishtanta, example will never be called an example if it transcends that binary between the scholar and the ordinary human being. So, again it is a remarkable thing, otherwise examples are not needed. Then Siddhanta, that is the theories, the established tenets. Needless to say, you have those mutually contradictory, conflicting, cancelling principles or theories constructed in the West. So, each, like if you follow modernist logic, then the postmodernist logic will, and even the postmodernist logic will be negated by the subsequent developments in the form of post-truth and post-humanist, you know. If you follow the historicist, then the new historicist logic will be there. So, you see these contradictory, you know, siddhantas, theoretical positions, you know, and that is one way of studying any object of the world, you know, through conflicting logical categories. But in our tradition, when we say siddhanta, then remember there are four kinds of categories of those siddhantas. What are these four kinds of? Their first category is that generally accepted principles, that they are called the Sarvatantra Siddhanta, that is established discourses or principles of all schools. So, for example, that the Panch Mahabhuta, the five foundational elements constitute this entire creation. So, it is agreed to by all the schools of thought. Earth is earth, water is water, air is air, fire is fire, and space is there, ether is there. So, these five, you give them any other name, but the element will remain the same. But then there are Pratitantra Siddhanta, that is, there can be dogmas which are peculiar to some schools. Now, here the problem of contradiction or conflict arises, but we do not cancel the conflicting theories. Mind you, the difference between, when we say Pratitantra, that is, we say this is a dogma peculiar to some school. If you are following only the Marxist logic and you are not prepared or you are not able to see beyond Marxism, then you will exercise a theoretical template which is the Marxist template. If you think that every male human is an enemy to a female human, and that is how you arrange them into hostile compartments and categories, and you use any kind of feminist lens, and you know where there is no synthesis or no harmony possible between the two, then this is again a Pratitantra, a kind of system of theory, a kind of theoretical system which is followed by some schools but opposed by others. Pratitantra, hai na? It is a contraposition, but within that position, that school, that theory prevails. Samajh mein aaya na? So, it is a very, I mean to say, this is not the negation or the cancel culture, hai na? That if I am not a Marxist, that I think, therefore I am a Marxist, and I am a Marxist, therefore I think. So, I am a postmodernist, therefore I am, and I am, therefore I am a postmodernist. You know, this kind of cancel culture, you know, I am secular and therefore I am an Indian. I am a Hindu, therefore I am not an Indian, or I am a Buddhist and therefore I am not an Indian, you know. So, look at all these kind of cancel culture, you know, which is the bane of those closed systems of ideological grids, you know, mutually conflicting. You know. We say that, look, if you use a particular theoretical template which is only peculiar to your own way of thinking, then you are entitled to that, your way of thinking. Kyun bhai? Then Lokayatas, I mean say Charvaks were not forced to convert to Buddhism or Vedanta. Rather, they were given the top position. In the anthology of Indian thought, that is Sarva Darshan Sara Sangraha, they were given the top position. While in the West, they were called either Bohemians or heretics. Kyun bhai? They were non-conformists. You can't divide this system into Astika and Nastika, because Astikas are those who believe in God. No, Astikas are not those who believe in God. And so is the case with Nastikas. Nastikas are not those who do not believe in God. Mind you, sometimes Astikas and Nastikas both do not believe in the existence of God, though is not there in Indian tradition, in the supreme essential divine. They say that there is only perception, there is inference, there is logical process of perceiving the real, and therefore there is not any pre-existing deity. So, this is also to be seen, that the Nastikas are those who do not admit or accept the pre-existing authority of the Vedic Shruti. Are you getting me? So that's fine. They have their own Shastras. Okay? So that your problem is to create knowledge in accordance with your own Shastras. If you do not accept the authority of the Vedas, fine. But then there are those who accept the authority of the Shruti tradition, that is Vedic Vangmaya, okay, and they start their process of logical critical thinking accordingly. And sometimes they both converge on the point of liberation, nirvana or moksha, attainment of right knowledge, yam or niyam, or the Buddhist path, that is the samyak marga. So either you follow the yoga patha or the Buddha patha, they are essentially they are the two modes, they point to the same goal. So why should we fight with one another? We can have a discussion with one another, and in an open architecture where there is no malice and hatred. That is why Nalanda was the site and the seat of harmonizing, creating knowledge using all these different modes and methods of critical reasoning. No one particular seat can be held as an ideal example, as an exemplar of the multiplicity, diversity of knowledge leading to, pointing to the same goal, that is cessation of dukkha, cessation of sorrows and the attainment of. So, then of course, Siddhanta. So, and then there is a hypothetical dogma, hypothetical adhikarana Siddhanta. If you accept a principle, accept its hypothesis, then it may also lead to the creation of knowledge of some kind. Again, you see that if there is a doctrine that there is a soul apart from the senses, because it can recognize one and the same object by seeing and touch, you must have accepted, by accepting the relationship between the soul and the senses, that the soul derives its knowledge through senses. Are you getting me? Because the soul can't speak. If you want to see the nature of the soul, that is Atman, then you can say Atman is fine, because the relationship, if we believe that Atman operates through senses, okay, because whatever knowledge we derive, the seeing, the touch, who touches, who sees, who hears, it is that Atman that generates the seeing, the touching, the hearing. then you can say that it is the Atman that derives its knowledge, though Atman does not need any kind of knowledge. My point is, this is the process where your Atman is involved in the creation of knowledge through indriyas, through your senses. Okay? So, you presume one, and you presume, you accept one hypothesis for the time being, and then you come to another kind of siddhanta. And then there is abhyupagama, implied dogma. Implied is a dogma, is a theory which has not been pronounced. Just say, for example, the sound is eternal or non-eternal. If you think that the sound is eternal, then it is not a substance, hai na? Because substance are non-eternal. So, the sound is eternal or non-eternal implies that sound is a substance if sound is a non-eternal, because non-eternality of sound will make it a substance. But those who create a counter logic that sound is eternal, then they will have to prove that sound is eternal. Because sound is eternal, then you have to, sound is not a substance, they have to prove it. Okay. Then established siddhanta, sarvatantra, pratitantra, and then avyava. What are the members, constituents of a logical utterance? Remember, whenever we speak, we convince others. This is a communicative logic also. This is a cardinal principle of effective communication, that all your coding, communication is coding. You encode your communication through the constitution or arrangement of the units of communication in a very logical manner. Because when the receiver receives that message, encoded message, he or she may immediately decode that syllogistic process. Syllogistic means the logical arrangement of any logical utterance. Yes, there can be an illogical sentence. Then if the sentence is illogical, that means the arrangement, the members, the syllogism is faulty. And so there cannot be either proper encoding or proper decoding. When we say, sir, this sounds logic, that is why the judge often says, you hear the recording of the Supreme Court of India or the High Courts of India, and the judge sometimes says, whatever you say, Mr. X, convinces me because of your cogency, because of your cogent logic. Whereas the other counsel is also pleading for the establishment of his or her logic. But since the logic produced by the rival advocate is not proper, the judge or the adjudicator, says that since that logic appears to be sounder than the logic created by the arguments of another counsel. So look at this and then, so look at this, we will come to the structure of that syllogism, that is, it must have a proposition, a pratigya. Pratigya, what is to be proved? The hill is on fire, or the hill is fiery, there is fire on the hills, this is the proposition. Then what is the reason? How do you make it an argumentative statement? The argumentative statement would be, the hill is on fire, then what is the reason? You have to give the hetu, the reason, and then even by giving the reason is to be substantiated through an udaharana, example. Sir, whenever there is a smoke, there is, and then even when you give that example, then you have to apply that example. Like all our talk or talks on Nyāya or critical reasoning will have to be substantiated through examples, and then further you have to make it applicable to the critical discussion. So, how would you apply that the relationship between fire and smoke or smoke and fire, and then what is your nigamana, what is your conclusion? So, the conclusion, if you follow that argumentative structure, then the proposition will be proved by the conclusion. समझ में आया? This is the vyapti. Vyapti means your hypothesis, your hypothetical proposition will be proved through a logical conclusion. So, then there is eighth is nigamana. When all these four means of right knowledge, that is pratyaksha, perception, anumana, inference, comparison, upmana, and shabda, that is verbal testimony, when all these converge means when they all come together to the constitution of your logical argument, then there is a conclusion. How it happens? Let us illustrate it through an example. What is the proposition or pratigya? The hill is fiery. So, there are two things. There is a hill and the hill is on fire. Then what is the reason or hetu? Because it is smoky. Now, somebody says that my proposition is the hill is fiery, and he gives the reason because it is raining. Can you give that reason? No, because it is smoky. Smoke is arising from certain parts of the hill. Then what is the udaharan or example? Example, look, it comes from your previous experience, or your shabda pramāṇa given by some others, reliable persons. Wherever is that, whatever is smoky is fiery. Whatever is smoky first, and then it becomes fiery, as in kitchen. So, what is the application? So, this hill is smoky. So, this hill is smoky, because the hill is smoky is the reason that you are giving to prove your hypothesis, your pratigya, your proposition. So, the application is, this hill is smoky, as when we were cooking in a kitchen, the kitchen first produced smoke and then followed by, therefore, the application is this hill is smoky. What is the conclusion? Therefore, this hill is fiery. The hill is on fire. So, the function of the proposition, and it is important to know that it enunciates the thing or object to be proved, and it renders the operation of other members of syllogism. Mind you, when you have no proposition to be proved, then how can you give the reason? Now, the problem with postmodernistic reasoning, it is no reasoning, because your postmodernist or post-structuralist utterances, even the post-humanist discourses, since you cancel out the very proposition of being a human or visualizing a human through post-humanism, remember, so you cancel out the basic proposition itself. And if you start with that this world is post-human, then you have to find the hetu. How do you call this world is post-human? Because the utterer of this utterance is also a human, and there are humans in the world through your direct perception. Narad, are you who is saying that this world is post-human? To whom? And there are again human beings for whom the discourse of post-human is being, so it cancelled out. That is the problem with the Western discourses. They say that the meaning is constantly deferred to. We say that the true meaning, final meaning is not possible. But you say that there is no meaningful utterance at one time is the denial of meaning. So, the function of reason or hetu is to furnish the means by which a thing is proved. You have to furnish that reason that becomes the cause of the thing to be proved. What is the cause of thing? Sir, there is a smoke, there may be fire. And when the smoke, quantity of smoke increases, you say, sir, there is fire. Check it out, sir. You have to explain that proposition, enunciate that proposition with the help of that reason, and then it may also accomplish the purpose by affirming the character of example. If you have an example, like the example of a kitchen, but suppose you do not have an example, you have a counter example, you can deny your proposition also, as I do. That a post-humanist would say, sir, this is my proposition, we are living in a post-humanist world, and he would give the reason that all the modes of knowing are past human and post-human. I would say, where is the udaharana? Kyun bhai? My udaharana, my example would be, the utterer herself or himself is a human. Those who are creating knowledge about the post-human are very much human, and the knowledge which is being created for the consumption or for the benefit of a community, that is the community of the humans. Where is the position of the post-human in the epistemological sense of post? And if you think that humans are being displaced by the agency of machines, then again, who are the creators of the machines? Humans are displacing humans, but that is not the post-human position. It is the humans who are displacing the humans. That is the logic. That is the logic. So anyway, so example, and then application, and then nigaman, and then the eighth one is confutation. I told you about confutation, that tarka is your confutation is proper reasoning. Never resort to unethical reasoning, simply because you have a point to prove in order to defeat the opponent, mind you. And therefore, nirlay, when your doubts and the doubts raised by others are properly addressed, only then arrive at nirlay or ascertainment. So, in order to be critical, the first and foremost thing is to cultivate the habit of self-criticism, internal criticism, antar alochana, antar alokan, and that is called the internal critique. And therefore, the English term criticism cannot be equated with alochana or samiksha. Samiksha and alochana, that is, they are two much wider terms in scope and meaning. And then there is the most important, perhaps one of the most important of the 16 categories is vada, or proper right discussion. There may be two differing sides on a particular, or three or four or many differing sides that differ in point of argumentative positions, holding argumentative positions on a particular aspect of knowledge. But since they are in the process of vada, or having a constructive dialogue, samvada, that is why vada necessitates samvada, constructive discussion, and therefore they are ready to understand and learn from each other's positions, each other's discourse. Even then they can agree to disagree very amicably. Mind you, vada does not necessitate the consequent conversion of the one to the point of view of another. It is not a condition. Yes, like Mandana Mishra, after that vada with Acharya Shankara, he became a disciple of Acharya Shankara and became Sureshwara. But Shankara did not put a pistol to, to the head of Mandana Mishra, or did not persecute Mandana Mishra. Never. Look at that open architecture of vada, where we used to discuss things agreeably and differ from each other agreeably, because the the primary purpose of holding a vada or discussion was to arrive at truth. So, two differential perceptions, two different positions on even one aspect of truth may be valid in different contexts, है ना? But the only issue is those who are engaged in vada, they should follow dharma. Mind you, if one, suppose if one is a terrorist proving the use of only violence and killing to address all the ills and evils of the world, and he is locked into, or he is having a vada with a person who says that, look, ahimsa or non-violence or love is the fundamental condition of human existence, but you can use violence only when there is no other solution left to address the human condition. So, the use of violence cannot be the starting point for peace. Are you getting me? Whereas the other party says that either you agree to my position or you face violence. So, there cannot be a discussion between the two. Until or unless they say that the norm is love or compassion for each other, violence is only context specific in exceptional situations. This is the common position, only then there can be a discussion on violence and non-violence. Violence is but qualified non-violence. It is not absence of violence, mind you, that is why ahimsa. It is non-harming the other, not harming the other. And remember, ahimsa is not physical. I love you fondly, intimately, but I have poison for you in my mind. That makes me even more dangerous than the ones who use guns to kill others, their opponents. If I have my poisonous ideas for you, feelings for you, then I will do considerable more damage to you. So, this kind of not harming through your word, through your deed and through your thinking. So, mansa vacha karmana. So, contrary to the popular perception of non-violence, which is not the exact again equivalent of ahimsa. Ahimsa is not non-violence. Ahimsa is acceptance of compassion for the other and not harming the other. That means, if there is a context that demands harming the other, that is possible as an exception in exceptional circumstances, because that will again generate compassion, because compassion, love, is peace is not possible when one follows the principle of violence in toto and the other follows the the extreme position of only love for all. Now, these two are contrary extreme positions that cannot involve a kind of possible constructive dialogue. So, are you getting position? There will be no meaning for that kind of debate. So, remember, even Ashoka did not abandon violence, because those tribes, those people living in the forest, when they were harming the traders, Narada, then they used violence. How would you solve the problems of the state without the state apparatus? And state apparatus is a deterrent apparatus. So, look at this is the position where I think in order to just simplify the discourse of ahimsa or you equate it with non-violence, error number one, and you think that there is a possible debate possible between the two absolute discourses, two absolutist, extremist discourses of either non-violence and violence. No, they can't speak to each other. Then there can be the hetvabhasa. I have spoken to you about the defective reasoning, which may be camouflaged as the valid reasoning, like most of the, again I said, the Marx, the Hegel, Locke, Hume, Nietzsche, and again the other day we were listening to a talk on Kant. They all presupposed that racism is real, that the blacks do not have the intellectual power to understand life. And some of them, including Plato and Aristotle, they denied reasoning or logic to women. So how would you justify that this kind of blind reasoning, dogmatic reasoning, which is manifest in the discourses of such emancipatory thinkers like Marx, Hegel, Kant, Hume, Locke? But they are at the center of research methodology used by all of you. Yes or no? And those, like the Indians, like the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, where a rigorous process of critical interrogation, critical inquiry has been thought out and enunciated, is regarded as metaphysical miasma, as spiritual mumbo jumbo, full of mystique and mysticism. That is a kind of, very vulgar form of Orientalism. Very vulgar form of Orientalism. Anyway, and then there are fallacies of reasoning, and you may use the erratic reasoning. Erratic reasoning, when your reason produces more conclusion than one. The same kind of reason may produce two conclusions, like the sound is eternal. This is erratic reasoning. The sound, because it is intangible, this is the reason that you give, that since sound cannot be felt, sounds cannot be touched, contacted, so it's intangible. So you say, since it is intangible, sir, sound is eternal. And then you give the example, whatever is intangible is eternal as atoms, whatever is intangible, atom. So you are giving the wrong conclusion, because sound cannot be compared with atoms. So you conclude, again you give the contra proposition, sound is non-eternal. You see both ways, sound is non-eternal, erratic reasoning, because it is intangible. Remember, if it is non-eternal, then you give the reason that it is intangible. Now, if it is non-eternal, it should be tangible. Are you getting me? So you give the again false reason. An example, whatever is intangible is non-eternal as intellect, but intellect itself is intangible. Have you touched your intellect, buddhi, mind, ahankara? You can't touch, you can't have a kind of perceptional knowledge about it. Right? So again, you are, these are the examples of erratic reasoning, that is the vyabhichari reason. Then you have virodha, contrary reasoning. Contrary is that two opposite conclusions can be drawn from the same reason, pointing to erratic reasoning. That is, what is it? Contradictory reasoning? Contradictory reasoning is, could we come to the contradictory reasoning? Contradictory reasoning. Contradictory reasoning is what runs contrary to the proposition itself. You give a reason which is oppositional to the basic hypothesis. So that reasoning is no reasoning, because it contradicts the very basic proposition. So suppose a pot is produced, that is the proposition. Contradictory reason is because it is eternal. Now remember, there is a contradiction between being eternal and being produced. They can't be put together as cause and as reason and proposition. So again, this is the example of contradictory reasoning. And then there can be prakaranasama. The prakaranasama means when your reasoning is equal to the question. That is, you make a proposition and then you give the reason, which is again a proposition of the same nature. The reason that you give is equal to the proposition itself. This is the kind of the circular reasoning, petitio principii. समझ में आया ना? Even in the Greek tradition this was pointed to, something like that. Sound is non-eternal, this is the proposition. Reason which is equal to the question. Reason which is equal to the question is because it is not possessed of the attribute of eternality. Now, here the subject matter of the topic is advanced as the reason. You are not making a different, you are repeating the proposition itself. Sound is non-eternal, and then you say, then you create another proposition, not the reason. What is the another proposition is that it is not possessed of the attribute of eternality, but they are the one and the same. Sound is non-eternal and it is not possessed of the attribute of non-eternality. Suppose this is red because this is not possessed of the non-redness. Are you getting me? This is a whiteboard because this is not a whiteboard because this is, as they say, because this does not admit of the attribute of non-whiteness. Both are one and the same statements. This is like you say, for example, you can further give an example of this prakarana sum or petitio principii, that this cow is non-eternal because this cow is not possessed of the attribute of non-eternality. Now, same, if you are saying cow is non-eternal, but you are repeating the same proposition. So, again this is the problem with lot of enunciatory verbosity or jargon which you find in most of the theoretical discourses nowadays, that they do in order when they come to explain a particular position, as in the discourses of Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, you get hetvabhasa, false reasoning, and then this kind of, in place of reason, she gives you another set of propositions. So, one proposition is not proved by another reasoning, another reason. Rather, in order to describe that or substantiate that proposition, she gives you n number of propositions also. So, you are again confused, where is the reason? And then there is kalatit, the mistimed reason. How? When the reason which is cited as the proof of that validity of an object, the time has lapsed or time lapses, during which the perception of that object should have been valid. Are you getting me? Suppose my air ticket for my journey back to Chandigarh is valid on 8th of May, the day of my departure. I hold the ticket when I reach the destination, and a day after, that is 9th of May, I hold that ticket that this is a valid ticket. But that was valid only during the period of 8th of May. I give you another example, that when a lamp is brought near a pot, then the pot is revealed by the lamp. A pot is revealed by the lamp. Now, the pot has a certain color. Pot, you can say a red pot is revealed as a red pot when a lamp is brought near the pot. So, you can say that when that light is removed, light is not the reason, because even if the light is removed, then the pot remains pot and the red pot remains red pot, the color remains. Now, another example, that when a drum is beaten with a stick, then there is sound, remember. So, you cannot say that sound is the property of the drum, are you getting me? Because the sound produces only when it is beaten with that stick. The stick remains and the drum remains, but the sound does not remain. In the case of the lamp and the pot remains, the color remains even when the lamp is taken away. If you take away that the conjunction of the stick which beats the drum, or which hits that drum, at regular intervals, then there is no sound. So, again this is kala teet that you are using again. And then you have the 14th one, that is chala, equivocation. Chala, equivocation, you can equivocate, you can evade the true meaning, and you can evade this true meaning through the word play, through equivocation. There can be a verbalized avoidance of reasoning or perception. You deliberately play upon the words. As I say, Dr. Johnson once, there was a fashionable lady in the hall, and Dr. Johnson and his biographer, both were there, and the biographer narrates this incident, that a fashionable lady approached Dr. Johnson, and in order to impress Dr. Johnson, who was a kind of polymath, a great scholar who composed the first dictionary of the English language in 18th century, 1754 or 56. That lady started using all kinds of French and German expressions. Now, Dr. Johnson did not like it, because he was enjoying himself, the party. So, after a while, that lady took out that snuff box, like our Ansh does, snuff box, So, the lady took out her snuff box. Now, Dr. Johnson approached that lady in order to teach her that reason, what was that reason? What was the reason? That you are only equivocating, you are using chala, you were equivocating when you were having a conversation with me. He said, will you please, madam, give me this rectangular creation, or which contains that aroma that gives the tintinnabulation to my olfactory nerves, which eventually terminates my nervous system. Now, then the lady did not respond to it, because in fact he was only equivocating. He was playing upon the words to create a position of non-meaning, delaying the meaning, avoiding the meaning. Then the lady again said, sir, I could not, Dr. Johnson said, sir, could you not follow me? Pardon me, ma'am, I asked for something. And then he again repeated the same thing. The lady was perplexed, and lady said, sir, say it in simple words. What exactly do you want? Well, exactly, you should have followed your own advice when you first approached me for a conversation. Be straightforward. Why do you use equivocation or riddles? When Narada was working and is working on music, I asked him, you have to be sure whether you are working on music or Sangeet. Don't equivocate that music is Sangeet and Sangeet is music. Don't equivocate that culture is Sanskriti and Sanskriti is culture. Don't equivocate that philosophy is darshan and darshan is philosophy. You have to qualify that I am using the word music only to suggest Sangeet. So, that is the limitation of my using the English language. But essentially I mean Sangeeta. Whenever and wherever I use the term music, only then you can save your logic, from being pseudo logic. Are you getting my point? So, then there can be samanyas, that when you assert the impossibility of a particular thing because of the impossibility of the whole. Suppose, again you see, this is used by most of the Western theorists or ideologues, that a particular cow is, you deny that a particular cow is black because all cows are not black. You deny that Indians have a very sound logic system because all the human beings do not have that Indian logic system, or since all the Indians do not have a Marxist logic system, and therefore no Indian can possess a valid logic system or logical reasoning. When you use when assert the impossibility of a particular because of the impossibility of the whole, so that is the error, equivocation. And then there is third one, and which concerns the literary interpretations. When you are interpreting a literary text, you take the literary meaning to be metaphorical, that is, you take abhidha to be lakshana and lakshana to be abhidha. That is, you sometimes confuse, you take the metaphorical meaning to be the literal meaning and the literal meaning to be metaphorical meaning. That is the metaphorical chal. Somebody is dying of hunger and he says, save my life, I am hungry. But if you take it metaphorically, will you take it metaphorically? The person would die. But then even the wealthiest person of this planet or of our planet Earth would say, I am hungry for true happiness. I am hungry for true happiness. Now the hungry loses its literal signification. Literal signification. So you see, when you take that literal for metaphorical and metaphorical for, particularly metaphorical signification should not be taken in its literal sense. That is the error to be avoided. Then jati, futility of argumentation. Futility may exist. Now, so remember, I forgot to tell you that vada is one of the most important category, and the subsequent two types, that is jalpa and vitanda. Vitanda is use of destructive logic without understanding the counterposition, which may be very valid. But if the discussant or a participant in a debate only wants to negate the position upheld by the other in order to establish her or his superiority and destroy the opponent in order to establish some sort of what you call adharma, so remember this jalpa and vitanda and vada, they have been clubbed together in the category called katha. Remember, katha means narration. Katha is the category because katha means people will come out with their own narrations. Somebody would use vada as a narrative. The mode of narrative will be grounded in the constructive discussion, that is vada, but there may be others who would use equivocation and cavil, destructive forms of logic, in order to establish their supremacy without understanding the position of the other, which is contrary to Vada. So remember, and this will all happen while engaged in a kind of narrativity or an act of narration. Narration means narrating our positions. So remember, the plus point in this kind of in the architecture of Nyāya is that even the negative assertions, negative usage of logic have not been cancelled out. Are you getting my point? That if you are a Marxist, fine, kindly prove how India existed even when there was no Marx, no such kind of positivist or empiricist thinking that you built up after the Renaissance and establish it during the Enlightenment period in Europe. But India was more logical, India was more rational than all of your rationalism and empiricism put together, you know. So how would you say that this was the period of enlightenment for the enlightenment of the world? Are you getting me? This is the period of humanism for the humanism of the world. How would you create those European categories and convert them into universal categories? That is the problem. So futilities, when you balance the homogeneity, balance the heterogeneity, the similarities are being balanced and then dissimilarities are being balanced. What is the conclusion? When you only say we are different, you are similar to what we are, so that you are putting together similarities on the one hand and dissimilarities on the other. What is the point of knowledge? Where is critical reasoning? So all ducks are ducks and all ducks are ducks and all cows are cows. All ducks are not ducks, all cows are not cows. Where is reasoning? Balancing the alternative, balancing the questionable, and then balancing the unquestionable. So you balance the questionable and then you balance the unquestionable. So you create two positions in order to balance out one statement with another without any reasoning. So look, there are 24 such kinds of positions, which are the positions of futility. One should avoid such positions in the writing of your research. There should be no statement merely for the sake of evoking similarity without criticality, without the critical examination of similarity or difference. You should not mention two different positions and merely by saying that we Indians are different from the Western or people in the West, you know, does not mean anything. Does not mean anything. Because what is the basis of our being similar or dissimilar? Similar to the West or dissimilar with the West. So that is the so 24 kinds of and then again please remove this this kind of brief description of the objects of knowledge, because this is an incorrect caption. I was trying to discuss the Nigraha Sthana, that is the 22 points of disagreement. 22 points of disagreement, that is where you have to stop the arguments in such situations. Again, we did not say that since the people who are demonstrating these positions of argumentation are to be punished, are to be penalized, are to be ostracized. These are very important things. They are unethical people. We did not say these things. We say you should understand these contradictory, these contrapositions, which many people may use, you know, but since they are not ready to understand the kind of critical reasoning that you are using, using valid means of right knowledge, then they may show these 22 positions, which are the positions of disagreement. Then there is no use carrying on an argument with them. So, look at all these kinds of positions. 22 such kinds of 24 such kinds of positions are also pointed out in the Tamil grammar Tolkappiyam. That is, these 22 conditions of disagreement. If someone is hurting the proposition that you have proposed, so he is not critically analyzing the proposition, he is hurting in order to humiliate you, or you are shifting the proposition yourself, then there is no debate in arguing with you, or there is no point in arguing with the other who continuously shifts the proposition, like Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, like Homi Bhabha. The location of culture, neither the location nor the culture have been explained in terms of positions. They are the shifting propositions. Can the subaltern speak? So, she does not define the subaltern in logical terms. Okay? She shifts that proposition in order to hurt the proposition that India and its knowledge system created a position for all those people who are marginalized, because the marginalized people speak so much in Indian tradition. Are you getting me? The proposition should have been, let the subaltern speak, not the can the subaltern speak. Because in our tradition, it is the marginalized, those who are marginalized voices right now, it is these very voices that were never defined as the subaltern voices, mind you, because they were at the center of discourse, like women, like those who are not Brahmins, but they contributed immensely to the right knowledge, to the knowledge about truth. So, how can you blame that thought tradition as Brahmanical, as anti-women or casteist? In fact, your Western tradition is patently racist, patently anti-women, patently anti-nature or anti-environment. Therefore, you always need some kind of post-humanist, post-truth, post-modernist, post-structuralist positions in order to support and substantiate your kind of moral relativism. So, we do not have look at the contribution of the Vedic Rishikas, the Buddhist women monks, Therigatha. Look at the Bhakti poets, look at the warrior women in India, narrated in the Rig Veda itself. And you assert, so look at that kind of Nigrah Sthana. You can't argue with Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Then Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak later on says that my exposition of the subaltern in the context of women as the subaltern subject was faulty. She accepted her fault, but enough damage has been done to the discourse of feminism, so-called feminism, isn't it? Enough damage has been done. So, now the same Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak says that we should abandon the study of world literature, comparative literature as they are understood in the West. And now let us exercise our minds on studying Sahitya. Look at this. Now, it took her so many years to come back to the same so-called Brahmanical, so-called Indian system of knowledge, which was so critical, which was based on critical reasoning, where Sahitya and Kavya were not based on race, class, gender, and the kind of in-between gendered positions. No. Sahitya and Kavya, they were the categories based on the relationship, which is the eternal relationship between Shabda and Artha, word and meaning. You may use Spanish, you may use a language that does not have a script nor grammar. still Shabda and Artha, Kavya and Sahitya can be applied to any literary and cultural representation or utterance. So, look at it, look at the scientificity of our own tradition. And there are so many commentaries which have been written on the discourse of Nyāya, that is our critical reasoning. Vatsyayana's Nyāya Bhashya, 5th century CE, Vartika of Udyogkara, 6th century CE, and then Tatparya Tika of Vachaspati Mishra, 9th century CE. Vachaspati Mishra belonged to Bihar, that Mithila region. And then Tatparya Parishuddhi of Udayana, 10th century, Nyāya Manjari of Jayanta, 10th century CE, Jayanta Bhatta, mind you. Tattva Chintamani of Gangesh, again belonging to the Mithila region, Gangesh, and Tarka Sangrah of Annam Bhatta, 17th century. And these are the texts that you can go to. That is Theos Bernard, a very preliminary guide to the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy, and the PDF has been given to you, circulated to you. And then this text of Nyāya Sutra of Gautama, again this has been circulated to you, the PDF format. And Ganganath Jha, Nyāya Sutra of Gautama, 4 volumes, again the PDF has been circulated to you. And then Radha Vallabh Tripathi's seminal book on Vada in theory and practice, you know. And then B.K. Matilal seminal book, Logic, Language and Reality. So, these are the few things that I wanted to say, and thank you very much. Dhanyavad, Abhar for your patient listening.